All right, Shalom. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory. Yahweh alone. All praise, honor, and glory to the Most High Yahweh alone. Peace and abundance to you guys. I wanted to break down Isaiah chapter 53 real quick. Because obviously, if you coming from Christianity, Isaiah 53 really will sound like Jesus Christ. I'm gonna just be honest with you. It does sound like Jesus Christ if you don't understand what it's really talking about. So this right here is the King James Version, but I'm going to switch to the Good News as well so y'all can see. But Isaiah 53 is really about the suffering servant, okay? So people say the suffering servant is Jesus. I would say the suffering servant is really us and all the righteous remnant. So basically, all the Israelites that keep Torah and that wanted to follow God in sincerity and in truth, we're the suffering servant because we get, persecuted. If you read 1st and 2nd Maccabees, or even, just the Old Testament in general, the real Bible is the Old Testament, the Tanakh. If you read the Tanakh, all the prophets suffered, all the, due to, the persecution of the Jews, right? The Israelites. And, 1st, 2nd Maccabees tells you about all the atrocious things, right? And so basically the sinners of our people, of course they deserve to die and go into slavery. But it was people like me and you that actually wanted to serve God, that didn't belong in slavery, that didn't deserve to have their tongues cut out, didn't deserve to have their eyes gouged, right? So we are the suffering servant because we're going to go through this suffering again in this time period, because we're coming into the end times. And it's going to be worse than any time on the planet Earth. We're going to go through it harder than all the other prophets did. The only thing is, if you're, if you have the protection from the Lord, Yahweh, then Lord willing, we're not going to, have our eyes, plucked out, like all the other prophets did. We're not going to get sawed in half, It's going to be more so like famines, pest, food shortages, race wars, riots, thermonuclear missiles, diseases, demonic entities, coming out of the woodwork that you've never seen before. So we're going to have it worse, but Lord willing, we get through it. And I just don't want my tongue cut out, crazy shit like that. If I die from starvation, which I know the Lord will, protect the servants. But, I would rather die from starvation or than, having my eyes plucked out, Some of the prophets had it really bad. And y'all fucking people, y'all should have had y'all eyes plucked out because y'all didn't even want to stop eating pork. Now, I love y'all though, obviously. Obviously, I love y'all, and so we do have it easier in this current time period. We do have grace. And, I praise the Most High for that because, it could have been the same as 2,000 years ago where they're trying to kill us, cut our arms off. And right now, we're actually living pretty good at this current moment in time, even though we're not in the land of Israel, even though our people are, just sinners, right? Most of our people are sinners. But let's get into Isaiah 53 now that you understand that this chapter is really about us as well as all the prophets that suffered, right? That's the suffering servant. We are the suffering servant as well as the prophets, obviously. The righteous remnant is the suffering servant. And you got to understand this chapter, if you read this before Jesus was born, you wouldn't have thought it was Jesus. So that's also something you got to keep in mind. So now let's actually get into the chapter. It's Isaiah chapter 53, verse 1. Who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? right? The arm of the Lord, the strength of the Lord, right? Your flex. That's the strength of the Lord, right? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of a dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. And so you got to understand, they'll try to say that this is Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ was actually, he was a representation of the righteous remnant, okay? The righteous remnant, the people that don't do anything wrong, they're the ones that get it the worst, usually. Because if you're a sinner, because sinners act like NPCs, that's what you got to understand, and sheep. They all flock together, but the good guy, is always going to be tormented by the bad guys, right? For no reason at all, right? People that try to do good get bullied the most. So, and they're saying that there is no beauty that we should desire him. People try to say that's Jesus, and Jesus was like physically unattractive. Not according to Google Images. They portray him as this blue-eyed white boy. Well, the white man is not the standard of beauty, but, obviously they don't portray Jesus as ugly most of the time. Now, some of them, but that's besides the point. Let's continue. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid it as it were our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. So he was despised, right? Now, this is really talking about the righteous remnant, like I said, and the prophets. They all suffered. We're suffering currently, and it's going to get worse. But basically, people, they despise the truth. They despise the Lord. They despise the scriptures. You got to understand, it's a movie, right? So these words, y'all got to actually apply these scriptures in real life, and you'll actually see that it's true. People will hide from this book. They will hide from these verses. Okay? Yeah. So, of course, they despise the prophets. Actually, let me get a chapter just to show y'all an example. I'm going to get this in the Good News translation real quick, so I don't have to switch to it. I want to stay on the page. So let me get 1 Kings. Let's get 22. This 1 Kings 22. Let me get verse 8. Wait, is this it? What I'm looking for? Okay, yeah. Let me get this. This is 1 Kings chapter 22, verse 8. Okay? Ahab answered, there is one more, Micaiah, son of Imlah, but I hate him because he never prophesies anything good for me. It's always something bad, right? So the prophets tended to usually prophesy bad stuff, but it was the truth, right? You got to hear the truth, or how you going to protect yourself from the bad stuff? Most people don't even, they're really retarded, and of course you don't want to hear bad stuff. Who wants to believe that America is going to get hit with thermonuclear missiles? I currently live in America. So obviously that's not something that I want to happen. But of course the Lord warned me, and so I have to take heed to it. Of course it doesn't make me feel good because I currently live in America. Of course I don't want to believe something like that. But because the Lord told me, I got to take heed. Most people hide that. They despise the Lord. They despise the prophets. They despise the truth. Okay? They killed the prophets. Remember that now. So let's continue. Verse 4. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. Right? All the prophets suffered, right? But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. With these words right here the prophets gave us, right? The Lord spoke to the prophets. The prophets suffered, giving us these scrolls that eventually ended up into this book, right? All that suffering eventually healed the nation of Israel. We got the words of the Lord right here 3,000 years later, right? And through these words, through this knowledge, we'll be healed, right? Because this is the only way we could please the Lord. The only way we could please the Lord is to keep faith in him and keeping this Torah, keeping his commandments, right? So, yeah, that's what verse 5 is about. That's not talking about Jesus got beat up for us on the cross and he's healing us. No, that's talking about the prophets and everybody that teaches, the truth of the scriptures. That's how we're healed. Okay, we're healed through the Lord and through this word right here. Okay, and we're gonna suffer, preaching his word and living it, right? Verse 6, all we have like sheep gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way. Let me get that in maybe the Good News translation, because this is the King James, and it's kind of, old, and who wants to read the Shakespeare English all the time? Isaiah chapter 53. Right, so it's basically the same wording here, but I'm gonna continue it. Verse 6, right? All of us were like sheep that were lost, each of us going his own way, right? So most people, they don't care about the truth. They're going their own way instead of the Lord's way. But the Lord made the punishment fall on him, the punishment all of us deserved. Okay? So basically, like I said, you got to remember, this is going to sound like Jesus if you're a Christian, but you got to understand, nobody interpret this as Jesus, because Jesus wasn't even born during Isaiah's time, right? This is at least 700 years before Christ, okay? So you got to understand that it's a little different, and they was plagiarizing our text, the Old Testament, falsely so-called. It's really the book of remembrance, okay? So, verse 6, like I was saying, all of us going our own way, and the Lord had laid on him the iniquity of us all. Right? So technically, this isn't literal, okay? Because it kind of makes it sound like the Lord is forgiving us for, it's making it sound like the Lord is punishing. Okay, let me explain what it means, okay? I keep getting tongue twisted. But basically, the righteous remnant, we suffer for the sins of the wicked Israelites. Because most of the Israelites today are clearly wicked, and we're suffering because of the wicked Israelites. But, through this word, and through our anybody that's teaching the truth of the scriptures, you're helping others, right? But the righteous remnant, we suffer for the sins of the wicked Israelites, okay? He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, okay? He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. Israel is likened to a sheep, right? You gotta understand that. So, of course, if you believe in the New Testament, you're going to see it as Christ. But you got to understand, Israel is also itself seen as a sheep, right? So this really applies to the righteous remnant of Israel. You got to remember that. He's brought us to a lamb. So basically, the prophets specifically, really, but of course the righteous remnant as well. We're going through it. We're oppressed. We're afflicted. And really, I guess I'm going to go back into the highways and byways, but that's just like of my own volition. Because, most people are not going to listen, unfortunately. And so, but basically, even most of Jake is not really doing anything. Right? Most of Jake does not care about the Bible. But that's besides the point. Let's continue. What else should I go? Verse 8. Because we're going to get that same judgment, that the wicked Israelites deserve. Or not judgment, but, a lot of us are going to die alongside the wicked Israelites. And that's actually what it's going to continue into, right? Verse 8. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living, for the transgression of my people was he stricken. Right? So the wicked Israelites, basically caused the entire nation of Israel to go into slavery. Okay? And so even the righteous Israelites had to suffer. Verse 9. And he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. Now that's talking about the righteous remnant. Let me get that in Zephaniah real quick. Oh, that's the wrong way. Hosea. Hold on, y'all. Zephaniah. Come on. There we go. This is Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 13. The people of Israel who survive will do no wrong to anyone, tell no lies, nor try to deceive. They will be prosperous and secure, afraid of no one. The people of Israel who survive will do no wrong to anyone, tell no lies, nor try to deceive. Right? So there's no deceit in the righteous remnant mouth. Now, of course, you have wicked Israelites today that want to go on the highways and byways, one west, and act like they're the righteous remnant, when really they're sellouts, okay? You have people like that just trying to make money off the gospel because they don't actually believe. They think it's just a book. But when the thermonuclears hit, missiles hit, then and when shit really hits the fan, people are going to start, wondering like, wow, I really did all that. I preached the gospel, for no reason, because I didn't truly believe. I was just trying to make money. Clearly, I have 2 subscribers, so I'm not making money off of this. Let me get that in the King James, though. Oh, this is Zechariah, my bad. I need Zephaniah. Habakkuk. Daniel. That's Obadiah. Hold on. Ezekiel. Lamentations. Hold on. I want that in the King James, though, because it sounded better. Amos. So then, Michael, Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 18. Oh wait, what was it again? 13. Here it is. The remnant